Hey, hello, how's it going? My name is Gray Jabez, and you're listening to Survival Skills Podcast. This is a show where we explore survival skills for the 21st century. And today we have a very interesting podcast with an incredible guest by the name of Timothy Maurice. Timothy Maurice, you can look him up on Twitter. But Timothy is very known for his work and research in neuroscience. So if you're interested in neuroscience, this episode is something that might actually excite you. But he is very well known for his consulting work in the science of image, persuasion, brand influence, behavioral design, and leadership behavior. But in this episode, we specifically focused on the science of image, which is personal brand building. And when we talk about brand building, a lot of people like to understand this as something that entrepreneurs do, or sort of a modern phenomenon of people building, their personal brand on social media and then they monetize it. But the truth is, maybe actually you think about motivational speakers when you think about brand building, simply. But the truth is, we're living in a digital economy, or forget digital. We just live in an economy that requires personal branding. We identify as individuals more than a group, as it used to be back in the day, right? So a personal brand matters, and it's exactly what we're gonna look into in this episode. So some of the very key elements we focused on, to be specific, was authenticity, what that means, and how can you actually build an authentic brand. And again, when we talk about personal branding, we're not talking about the online gurus anymore at all. We're talking about you, whether you have a job or you're an executive or you're an entrepreneur. Personal branding is very important. And we also talk about social media, and we also discussed, at the end of the podcast, he shared his formula to help you 100x your personal brand. So I hope you guys enjoy this. If you listening to this, please understand that you can also watch this on Survival Skills Podcast on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel now. Would appreciate you guys to go on there and subscribe to it. If you're watching this from YouTube, be aware that you can also subscribe to the Survival Skills Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and all the available podcasting platforms. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy this episode and share it across with your friends as well, because I think it's very important for all of us to learn how to build personal brands successfully. Other than that, enjoy my interview with Tim. Thank you. So Tim, I don't think I've done you justice in terms of your introduction. Do you want to just give people a couple of your introduction, basically, a brief one?
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. For me, it's quite simple. I'm interested in the unconscious mind and how I call it from neurons to narratives, how the brain translates and how we take what's happening in the mind and we position stories. Everyone listening is trying to position their story. If you're in a relationship, you don't want a story that says, I'm shady, you can't trust me, right?
Right.
If you're a president, you want people who are trying to trade with you, trade with your country, to feel confident in the story of the country and story of the leadership. You want people who are listening to Survival Skills Podcast to have a story in their mind about this podcast, that it's quality, that when you come to this podcast, it's guaranteed to be a good podcast. So, that's essentially what I'm interested in. I like you said, I study a bit of neuroscience, behavioral science, and I've had 3 chapters in my career. The first chapter of my career, in my 20s, I was interested in how your image impacted how people treated you. The second, in my 30s, I was really kind of, looking at the psychology of, your personal brand and your identity. And then I went back to school at MIT and studied neuroscience, and then I even studied even further behavioral science. And then I realized I've got something I'm really passionate about, which is fundamentally, how do we position people's stories in your unconscious mind? And so I've been in South Africa since about 30 years old, and which is the second chapter of my career. And I absolutely love this place. It's kind of a base for me. So I spend about 60% of my time here. And then the rest, I sort of travel between the West and, about 10 African countries. So
Right. And I think the main sort of idea that I want to discuss on this episode specifically is about personal brand. And, you have pretty much written a lot about this. But the way I want to make this transition, I want to start it the same way you started the book on PBQ. Okay. You talked about class, right? That before we didn't had the idea of a personal brand. You had to come from some sort of loyalty, or in one of the big class families for you to share some sort of class, or you have to be born from a certain blood or DNA. You had to share some kind of thing that you do have inherently in a way. And then we evolved from that into, after humans realized that, hey, there is power in the individual, right? And that is an idea that keeps on growing right now. And it has taken us this far so far. And I think it's much more of a fairer way of looking at humanity, that each one of us is an individual. So do you think that we slowly losing that?
So there's two key ideas that you brought up. One is that what I was arguing is that for the last couple generations, we've had the luxury of identifying and positioning ourselves. Whereas historically, if you were born into whatever family you were born into, you were branded. So if you were born in a royal family, you were branded as someone who had royal blood. If you were born a peasant, you were likely to stay a peasant. Like, the ability to position yourself is a very new phenomenon. Like in the 19th, 18th century, whatever family you were born into, you were sort of stuck at that level. If you were going to be a herder, you were a herder. And so nowadays we have the ability to use technology, our phones, and you can become a TikTok superstar. You can become a YouTube or an Instagram superstar. If you go inside of a corporate, you go in and you almost have a blank slate. You can physically position yourself however you want to position yourself. So that's the one side of the conversation, is that the idea of personal branding became important because we are now in an era where it is a fundamental right that society should give you the opportunity to position yourself. There are very few societies left in the world where, other than sort of the Indian caste system, where if you're born in a lower caste, you're kind of stuck in that caste. But for most places in the world, if you're watching this, there's a good chance that you have the ability to position yourself however you want to. So that's the one thing. Now, the second part you were bringing up when it comes to the idea of how you're positioned when it comes to dealing with kind of global challenges, that's another conversation entirely. And I think that, if you can give me a specific example that you're referring to, like, you mentioned global warming, but I'm not sure what, how that relates to personal branding.
Right. Okay. I can make it more clear for you. So they are floating ideas, some sort of, maybe I would call them new ideas about where what humanity is trying to achieve, or what we're trying to be collectively in a way, in this big global village. So there are ideas that are sort of championing the narrative. They're on top of things. And if you stand to differ from the consensus of those ideas, then you pretty much cast out, without maybe sometimes adequate information or proof of certain ideas. So
you mean like cancel culture?
Cancel
culture.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point to put it. Yeah, cancel culture. I think that's the right word.
Yeah, okay, cool. So basically, you've got on social media, you've got dominant, let's say Black Twitter, for example, And you look at a good example is, I don't know if you listen to hip hop, but J. Cole recently, J. Cole, J. Cole made a song about this young, extremely sort of revolutionary young woman who was fighting for Black people. And J. Cole basically made a song, said, you could be kinder in terms of how you chastise those you're educating. And Black Twitter in America basically came out and was saying he was speaking from a place of patriarchy, misogyny. He was perpetuating the stereotypical historical male privilege position. And many people started to frown on J. Cole. So whatever the dominant sort of revolutionary voice is, whether it is global warming, whether it is trans community, whether it's Black Twitter, if you come out against them and you are shown to be someone who's anti, let's say you are extremely sort of conservative and the liberal position of, championing the LGBTQI community, for example, and you're not shown to be speaking as an ally, you can get canceled. And you can see that in America, for example, where, a lot of white people who have not been seen to embrace the Black Lives Matter movement. If you do not embrace it kind of publicly, social media can be quite vicious and tear you down. And so I think it's important to, as you're positioning your personal brand, to be aware that there are these dominant communities that are quite radical and revolutionary in their approach. And if you do not position your message, the best thing is to be authentic and to be true to yourself and go, look, if you don't believe in Black Lives Matter, then, you need to justify yourself. Otherwise, they will cancel you. You need to be able to position yourself in a way where you got a highly articulate opinion, because you can be a Black Lives Matter champion, for example, but not have a strong opinion and then find yourself get canceled. So whatever you do, whether it's global warming, Black Lives Matter, trans community, whatever community you're going to speak out and try to speak towards, be educated. Like Nick Cannon with Wild and Out, and got basically was trying to speak about the how Jews are positioned and they have all the power and so forth. And he ended up losing, his properties that he'd worked so hard for, because he wasn't educated at the level that he should have been about what he was speaking about. And you could see that he was fumbling with it and so forth. So whatever you're going to speak about, have mastery, be clear about it, be well-researched, or say to people, I'm going to study this a bit more so that I can align my values, I can align my brand accurately before just speaking randomly. And I think social media tempts us to just speak randomly about stuff. And I always say to people, study, especially issues that are contentious, issues where there's been oppressed people. Make sure you have your facts together before you start speaking about Black lives, because you can't just come out and say George Floyd, he had this issue, or no. Understand the systemic challenges that George Floyd was facing before start writing him off because of his criminal background, because then you realize that it's much deeper than what you see.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a very articulate way to put it. And I think we can go on a very long chat about that, but I think to stick to the concept of the episode, let's get back to personal branding. So when you think about personal branding, it's a phenomenon concept or idea that now we tend to embrace it. And at some point in the book, you even mentioned that it can be dangerous. What did you mean by that?
So once you're branded, first of all, it's difficult so sometimes a personal brand can go against being authentic. So let's say, for example, you position yourself as a podcaster and as a voice that's championing various things. But then let's say 2 years down the line, you've outgrown that and you're no longer this person, but people still treat you like that old version of you.
Right.
What happens is at times you often feel compelled to go back to that, even though you're no longer that person. And so why it can become dangerous is that there can be a conflict between what you are versus what you're known for. And if you've moved on and you're no longer that person, and you feel to get people's attention, I still have to act like the old person, then you're no longer being authentic. You're lying to the public, you're lying to yourself. And I see that happening all the time, especially with influencers. They feel like, because my brand is this way, I have to say certain things, even though I no longer believe that. I'm no longer there. And that's where it becomes dangerous. And so, for example, if you look at brands like Lance Armstrong, it's like my brand became this, and I had to continue to position this so much that I'm willing to even cheat to become this. And so when the story around your name and the brand position around your name is so strong that it doesn't allow you to be honest, it doesn't allow you to be authentic, and it forces you to compromise your values just to stick to this, then you're in a very dangerous position.
Right. So how much can one be really authentic? Like, to what extent? Say, let's put it to a number. I know that no one can be 100% authentic, especially in the world that we're living right now. But to what rate do you think, or who are the most authentic people that you have interacted with or you know of?
I think authenticity is even a fluid statement. And this is very controversial. So, I mean, my third book is called Soul to Soul, SOUL to SOLE. And that entire book was questioning what is authenticity. And what I was arguing is that most of what we do and the decisions we make, we're not even aware why we did it. We are a mystery unto ourselves. This is not very popular, but I'm going to say it. Since we've been having a conversation, you've blinked a number of times. You even just blinked again. Mm-hmm. How many times have you told yourself to blink in that process? None.
Zero.
It's happening on automation. You are programmed to blink. And that's what's happening with most of our decisions. It's happening on an unconscious level. So to even argue that you're being authentic when you don't even know why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, science has shown that most of us, like, there's a concept called priming. If I'm speaking to an audience, and on one side of my audience, I put people with headphones on, and on the other side of the audience, they don't have headphones on. And this side of the audience, I speak to them about fast cars. I speak to them about New York. And on this side, I speak to them about vintage cars, and I speak to them about Cape Town. And then I say, after I tell everyone to remove your headphones, and I say, let's walk a half a kilometer to lunch. The group that I spoke to about fast cars in New York is going to walk faster without realizing it. Because I've been priming their unconscious mind to think about fast things like fast cars in New York. And the ones that I've spoken to about Cape Town and vintage cars, old things and slow things, their nervous system has been programmed to think slower, so they'll walk slower. And this study has been reproduced many times, which means the way you're walking has been impacted by what I was saying, not by your ability to act authentically.
Right.
So authenticity is a manifestation of what's happening in your unconscious mind. It's what's happening in your dominant conscious thoughts. It's what's happening in the environment. For example, if you see dirt all around and trash on the street, you're more likely to throw something on the street. So the street environment and the environment impacted your behavior. Yeah. So what is authenticity? Authenticity is a combination of what's happening in the environment, what's happening in your unconscious mind, and what's happening in your dominant thoughts. So the confluence and the integration of these is where you get authenticity. Now, let me simplify this a little bit. So I believe the only way to live authentically based on what I just shared is to have an applied mindset. So you go into every environment and go, I'm going to apply myself this way today. So I'll give you an example. Let's be real simple. So let's say you've got a wife. Do you treat your wife the same on the night of Valentine's as you do at a funeral, as you do at a wedding? No, you treat her differently based on the environment. Hopefully, on the night of Valentine's, the way you treat her is different than how you treat her is that if you guys visit a funeral together. You get my point? The environment dictates a different way to apply yourself. And this is very important, is that you see authenticity as an applied behavior. In that moment, I want to take my value system and I want to apply myself to this moment. And that's where you get authenticity. So anyway, to answer your question, there is no ratio. There is no number of people. The people that I know that are what I consider to be most authentic are the people who are the most thoughtful. And at any given moment, you are thinking, you are aware, and you are conscious of how you should apply yourself in that moment.
Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, I would probably put Barack Obama in that category then, you know, when they speak, but then at the same time, I have a problem trusting people who are very calculated when they speak.
But this is my point. Oh, Barack Obama being president and speaking to a nation can't say the same thing that he would say when he's speaking to his boys about hip hop music. You get my point?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, speaking to the nation does not call for you to share your street cred when it comes to how well you know a lyric from Jay-Z. And so this is my point, is that if you are just fully raw and you said everything that your unconscious mind was thinking, that everything you felt, for example, if you pass somebody on the street and they're wearing something horrible, and because you're in fashion, you know it's horrible. What good is authenticity to say you look terrible and you don't even know this person? You get my point?
Yeah,
if you define that as authenticity, having no filter as authenticity, I'm not sure what good that is, right? If your girlfriend comes out and you're about to go out on a lovely date and she asks you, do I look fat in this? And the truth is you look fat.
Right.
If you say I look fat, I mean, what good is being authentic in that moment? You're just gonna ruin the whole night.
Yeah, well, so, you know, you can look at it also that it might haunt you in future if something happens and then they refer back that, hey, but I asked you about this. This is what you told me.
Yeah, so anyway, this is my point. You have to decide, there's two ways to go about any situation. You can take the risk of creating the error on the side of I'm gonna speak my full truth, or I'm gonna speak on the era of being polite and diplomatic. Both are errors on some level. So then you've got to decide, I can operate in the middle and take chances and take the risk. What are the consequences? So you got to ask yourself, what are the consequences?
Yeah. That is a very good approach. So going back to our story on PBQ. So I just wanted to know what are the 3 dimensions of branding, and maybe you can also expand a lot more on that, because I think that's very important.
Yeah. Okay. So I decided to come up with a model. You're speaking about this book, by the way, Personal Brand Intelligence.
Yes.
For anybody who wants to get a copy, they can go to my website or order from a local bookstore. And what I did was I created a three-phase model. Let's look at you. I like to look at people, a real life example.
Right.
So let's take you. What's your full name, by the way? What's the full name?
My name is Grey Jabez. Grey Jabez. Greyjabesi.
Okay. So when people think about Grey Jabez, there are 3 dimensions in terms of how they frame you. There is the unseen. I call it bodies. 3 bodies. There's the unseen body, which is what we don't see. It's your values, your skill set, your mindset, all the things that provide your foundation. And then there's what we see, the fact that you're wearing a beard. Guys who wear a beard like you are usually players. So maybe people, they see you, they think you're a player.
Come on. Come on, Tim.
Sorry, I don't mean to call you out. But
some people might agree with you though, but okay.
Yeah. So guys with beards, thick beards, basically they're signaling their health. They're signaling their vitality and their strength. So beards became a power of signaling. We do the same thing. You see a guy wearing bright socks, he's signaling. So that's your second body, is your image. Your second body is how you dress, how you treat people, you know. So if you find a guy who's wearing a beard, bright socks, he's trying hard to signal that I'm available, that I'm a member of the game, right? You take the opposite of that. You take an old white professor who doesn't even think about their hair, like an Einstein, they just put on whatever. They're signaling that I'm so interested in my work that I have no time to think about how I present myself. So they just come out however they are. So your second body communicates to people's unconscious mind. As I started out this conversation talking about, your second body is a big part of how people see you. The ideal goal is to take your first body, let's say you say Gray is discipline. So I'm gonna position myself as discipline. Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna position myself with wearing clothing that is well pressed, that has been altered and the sleeves fit properly, for example. Or let's give a better example. So let's say, for example, people see you, but they don't know what your values are. They look at how you trimmed your beard, how you dress. They can assume your values are things like, I'm smooth, I'm refined. Are you with me?
Right.
So that's your second body. Your third body is everything that's associated to you. It's the fact that you have this podcast. It's your friends, your social media, everything that's associated to you that people can engage when you're not around. So bringing back Barack Obama, a good example is Barack Obama, when he was a no-name senator before he became president, Barack Obama's wife, Michelle Obama, had 2 top academic degrees. And so it was easy for his fundraising team when he was a senator to position him to the public, because he was seen to be married to a powerful woman. So the fact that he was married to Michelle Obama, it was easy for people to trust him. So I always say to people, look, you may want to check who you are associated to, because they can bring good or they can bring bad. Like the Russian proverb says, if you show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are. And this is the thing, is this is why social media is so powerful, is that it creates an intricate network and an intricate pattern that brings these 3 bodies together. It shows your values by what you post and what you like and what you retweet. It shows your image, but then it also shows what you're connected to. And then it brings all of these together into an identity that can demonstrate influence or brand power. And right. So that's the idea of these 3 bodies and the structure of personal brand intelligence.
So I see 2 ways about this. When you give the example of an Einstein or someone who is more interested in their work. And social media, to me, has the opposite effect of that, where people focus more on the scene, because, you know, that's how people interact with social media. They see things. And then it later compromises their unseen. So it almost like a facade where, you know, you have created an image that's really well presentable. It interacts in a way that people like to interact on social media, but then there is not much behind the scenes, and it takes like 1 or 2 very unexpected events to pretty much collapse the entire brand or something. So okay, that's what I was referring to. And, okay, on the Einstein side, it also that, you know, you have incredible work, but if you don't know how to build the scene, it also becomes a problem, because you cannot really get to that next step. So I think it's unusual for me to see people that are really good at both of these. You find that most people are good at one thing and not much on the other. And what I'm trying to figure out is how to build the other without compromising too much the other thing.
Okay, let's use social media. Let's wipe out, in fact, you can even edit out the last 5 minutes of what I was saying, and let's hone in on this particular point.
Right.
So what social media has done is created a filtered reality that people are okay with. If you think about how many filters people use even on a phone call, there's an idea, what we call there's a concept in Greek philosophy called your ideal self. All of us have that. What is your ideal weight? What is your ideal skin texture? What is your ideal everything? And what filters are trying to do is position your ideal self. Maybe you don't like your eye color, so there's a filter to give you some other green or blue or light brown color, right? So what filters do is help you position what you think is your ideal self. So if you've got blemishes on your skin, there's a filter to make your skin look smooth. And the reason why this is powerful is that there is a desire in all of us to position ourselves as a level 10, as a perfect version of ourselves. So if you don't have a six-pack, I don't know do you have a six-pack? You look like you got a six-pack.
I don't have a six-pack. I wish.
Okay. So there is a chance that if there was a filter for six-pack, you could be tempted to post this with no shirt, right? But what you're saying is that's problematic. To position yourself with a six-pack when you don't have a six-pack, eventually it's going to catch up with you. You meet a new person and then you take off your shirt and they go, what happened?
Right.
Now, right? So the question becomes, where is the balance? Where is the balance? And it's interesting because let's use females, for example. When a woman puts on makeup and she wears a bra that's that designed to lift her breast up, you are drawn to the idea that she's presenting her ideal self. Then you get home, the bra comes off, the makeup comes off, and you see a very different reality. Does that make you treat her any differently, or does that make you admire her for trying to position her best self? Okay. Now, when it comes to applying this logic to positioning your ideal self to real world reality, when it comes to building a brand, people are very much interested in what your ideal version of yourself is by nature of the society that we live in. But
okay.
if you take the Alicia Keys version, Alicia Keys decided, I'm going to pursue what my natural self is. I'm not even going to wear makeup. I'm going to always go my natural self. What happens is you find that brands and, her allies, there are a group of people who are interested in that. And then there are a group of people who are turned off by it. So You've got to decide, who is my market? Is my market interested in glam, to the intensified version of myself, or what I call the low intensity version of myself, which is the more natural version? So the framework you can think about this is low intensity version of myself or a high intensity version of myself. Some markets appreciate the high intensity version where you're in the entertainment industry. I doubt very seriously someone in the entertainment industry is, if you're in music, for example, people are very interested in the high-pitched intensity of who you see yourself as versus the low energy, natural version of you. Yes. So certain careers draw you in based on that. And hopefully you can be in a career where they don't, if you want to be authentic like that, the natural version, if you're in a career, let's say, for example, you work in the bush and you are a game drive host, then you don't need the glammed up, intensified version of yourself, the filtered version. And so I try not to be very judgmental. If, I've got clients who are super influencers with 3 million followers where positioning themselves in the glammed up version is what attracts people to click like, and that's how they get their brand influence to grow. And there is a balance that you've got to decide which area that you're in that makes the most sense to you.
Are there any tips and tricks that you guys in the world of neuroscience know that one should pay attention to or should apply into their brand building?
Yeah. So today I just posted a video speaking about breaking the formula. Where most people mess up in this game and why they don't grow and they don't break through to the next level is that they are trying to follow an existing formula versus creating their own formula. So what you want to do is go, this is the industry I want to be in. What is the dominant formula? Let's say, for example, Coca-Cola wanted to, Red Bull wanted to compete with Coca-Cola and wanted to overtake them. So instead of trying to be like Pepsi or a competing brand, they broke the formula. They said, we're not going to try to be refreshing. We're going to try to give you wings. We're going to break the messaging formula. We're going to appeal to a different dimension of your human ability. We're going to give you a smaller can, and we're going to give you almost a medicinal feel. It's going to taste bad, but it's going to make you feel like you've got wings. So they broke the formula. Apple did the same thing with iPhone. They were like, we're not going to try to give you a better phone that has a keyboard. We're going to give you a sexier phone without a keyboard that changes the category. So breaking the formula, for example, and I said this in my video, that when I approach a media partner, I'm not trying to create the existing formula. So when I went on Metro and I was partnering with DJ Fresh, they wanted me to do sort of a motivational feature. I said, no, that's what people expect. They expect motivation. I'm going to give you ideas. And that's how I came up with the concept of fresh ideas, is that I was breaking the formula because I knew that when people are driving, when they heard ideas instead of motivation, they would perk up. And so what happens in the brain, when you're trying to position yourself on social media, you got to think about this. Anything that's part of an existing pattern does not catch the attention of the brain. It does not catch the intention. So the brain is a pattern recognizing machine. If it sees an existing pattern, it does not perk up. So if I see 2 + 2 = 4, I don't even notice it. But if I see 2 + 2 = 5, then I go, hey, wait, there's something interesting there. What are they trying to say? So if you're trying to position yourself on social media, break the existing formula in the area that you're trying to operate in. If you're an influencer in fashion, do something completely different in fashion that catches people's attention. If you're a podcaster, if you are in food, whatever you're trying to do, you've got to think, let me put the pieces together. And here's how you look at the formula. The formula consists of the market, the medium you're doing it in, and the message. If you don't break one of those, you're not going to be noticed. You're going to get lost out there. And so every time I go about trying to position myself, I look at the formula and I go, how do I tweak one side of the formula so that I can get people's attention to pay attention? So maybe I can even establish a new category, which is why I didn't do a book just on personal branding. I created a new category called PBQ. You get my point? So I'm breaking the formula.
Yes.
And the final point about this, to position yourself, instead of saying, I just want to inspire people, you got to go, you got to narrow the dynamic. So I want to inspire women. I want to inspire women between the ages of 22 and 30. I want to inspire women who have been abused. I want to inspire women who have been abused that are entrepreneurs. And once you narrow it down to that level, you're going to find your audience quicker. If you make it broad and you continue to position your idea, whatever it is you're trying to do, too broadly, you're going to get lost because there's too many people already doing it.
Right, that is fantastic. I appreciate it, especially where you said, the brain is a pattern-seeking mechanism, and it pays attention to what's unusual, pretty much.
Yes,
that's actually very true. So,
cool.
Is there anything would you like to share before you close?
I would like to say to people that right now, people are overwhelmed with stress. People are overwhelmed with uncertainty. So whenever people are overwhelmed with stress and uncertainty, if you're trying to position your brand to people who are overwhelmed, the more simple you are, and the more you appeal to something specific in their psyche, the more successful you're going to be. If you're too broad, it requires people to think too much to figure out what you're about. And so right now, with the world being full of consumer lack of certainty, and all of this stuff, if you remain broad, you're going to be lost. If you decide to go, I want to speak to something specific. I'll give you an example. If I'm trying to get your attention and I post something about I am doing a podcast on having the nicest beard in the world, it's going to get your attention. I can already tell you that. if I have an offering that I position on your page about having the best headphones for podcasting, it's going to get your attention. Right?
Yes. Very simple.
But that's the point. If I try to position something about young men, it's going to go right past you because it's just not focused enough.
Right. Thank you so much, Tim. I think I hope we can do this again some other time. I have other things that I'd like to discuss with you, but I would like to even read more of your work, and then we can talk about other more philosophical ideas, because those are very long-winded. But I appreciate your time.
All the best, man. Keep up the good work.
All right. Cheers. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you for watching this episode. And lastly, before I go, just a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Crypto University. CryptoUniversity.co.za is the website, is the best platform for learning about cryptocurrency investing or cryptocurrency trading. Thank you for listening or watching this episode. And before we go, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode was proudly brought to you by CryptoUniversity.co.za. Crypto University is the best platform for training if you want to become a cryptocurrency trader or a cryptocurrency investor. I'm sure you guys have heard about cryptocurrency, but maybe you haven't really taken the time to learn about it, or it sounds very complex for you to get it. Crypto University has the best world-class courses that will help you to get through it and become a successful investor